Along Highway 50, which winds its way from Ocean City, Maryland, all the way west to Sacramento, California. It's part of his series of reports for NBC and the USA Network on the American character. Tonight we meet a veteran back from war who finds that in a lot of ways his mission is just starting. Tom found him in St. Louis along Highway 50.
If it's true, much is expected from those to whom much is given. Eric Greitens is more than living up to his end of the bargain. A Rhodes Scholar turned Navy SEAL, Greitens has seen some of the worst the world has to offer. His PhD work took him across the globe, photographing those caught up in war and genocide. And he survived deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. In March of 2007, just 2 weeks before the end of his tour, his unit was hit by a suicide truck bomb in Fallujah in Iraq. Greitens escaped with minor injuries and a whole new mission in life.
The first mortar round landed as the sun was rising. Joel and I both had bottom bunks along the western wall of the barracks. As we swung our feet onto the floor, Joel said, "They better know they wake me up like this, it's going to put me in a pretty uncharitable mood." Mortars were common, and one explosion in the morning amounted to little more than an unpleasant alarm. As we began to tug on our boots, another round exploded outside, but the dull whomp of its impact meant that it had landed dozens of yards away. The insurgent mortars usually wild, inaccurate, one-time shots. Then another round landed, closer. The final round shook the walls of the barracks, and the sounds of gunfire began to rip. I have no memory of when the suicide truck bomb detonated. Lights went out, dust and smoke filled the air. I found myself lying belly down on the floor, legs crossed, hands over my ears, with my mouth wide open. My SEAL instructors had taught me to take this position during incoming artillery fire. They learned it from men who passed down the knowledge from the underwater demolition teams that had cleared the beaches at Normandy. Now, when the truck bomb went off, it actually ended up taking out the entire western wall of our barracks. And what the insurgents were doing at the time is they were actually packing chlorine into the suicide car bombs and the suicide truck bombs. And their intention was to create casualties not just with the explosion, but also by creating this poison chlorine cloud after the explosion went off. And we were in the barracks. There was a Marine who was next to me, kind of grabbed each other. We made our way outside the eastern side of the barracks. And as soon as we got outside, I fell down to my hands and knees. And because of the chlorine, my eyes were burning, and my nose was burning, and my throat was burning, and I was down on my hands and knees, and I was choking, and I was coughing. And I looked down on my uniform, and I saw that there was blood on my uniform. And so I started to pat myself down to check for an injury. I didn't feel like I was injured, but you're trained to know that sometimes a surge of adrenaline can actually mask the pain of an injury. And so I started to pat myself down again and again, and then finally I pulled my hands away and I realized it's not my blood. It was the blood of my friend Joel, who had been standing this close to me. And when Joel and I were serving, that was just one moment from our service together on the front lines. And The Heart and the Fist is really, it's a book about service on the front lines. And I talk about service on the front lines of humanitarian work overseas, working in places like Bosnia with refugee children, working in Cambodia with kids who'd lost limbs to landmines, working in Rwanda with kids who'd been separated from their parents. Talk about what it's like going through Navy SEAL training and combat deployments overseas on the front lines of places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And then I also write about the work that we do today on the front lines here at home, working with wounded and disabled veterans to help them to find a way to win this battle on their front line so that they can come back and continue to serve as citizen leaders again. And what I've learned in all of that work is that we all have a front line in our life. We all have a place in our life where our hopes for the future and our hopes for the people that we love come right up against the reality that the world presents to us. And I believe that in order for us to be successful on those front lines, it takes a combination of courage and compassion. I think it takes a combination of the heart and the fist to be successful on those front lines. And I'm really excited to be here with all of you today, because one of the other things that I have also learned is that in order to be successful, it takes the right kinds of friends.
You're really going to push yourself and you're going to challenge yourself in a new way. There are going to come points where you're going to need people to carry you, and you're going to need strong teams, and you're going to need people to come together to work with you through those challenges. So one of the things that they say is that you got to pay a lot of attention to the people who are with you. You got to pay a lot of attention to the teams that you're forming. Right? We live in a culture today where a lot of times when we think about leadership and we think about performance and we think about challenge, we don't spend enough time thinking about the importance of friendship. And I will challenge you to go to a Borders, go to a Barnes & Noble, go to your favorite local bookstore, and go to the leadership and performance section, the business section, pull down all of the books, and let me know if you can find one chapter on friendship. But it wasn't always that way. When Aristotle wrote a book called the Nicomachean Ethics. And in the Nicomachean Ethics, it's a book where he's talking about what it takes to become a person of character who is constantly challenging themselves, constantly striving for what Aristotle calls eudaimonia. It basically means a flourishing life. Somebody who's always pushing themselves to meet those challenges, to live a flourishing life. And what Aristotle says, he divides the book into 10 chapters. Each chapter addresses a separate subject. There's only one subject that gets 2 chapters, and that subject is friendship. Because what Aristotle argues is, he says that there is no philosophy that you're going to study. There is no quotation that you can carry with you that's going to have anything like the impact on your life and your ability to become more and to do more and to challenge yourself to be more as the people who are around you and the people who are your friends.
One of the things that you learn in the military is that you take care of your guys.
What Greitens heard from his fellow veterans was that despite their wounds, they wanted to continue to serve. So he founded The Mission Continues, an organization offering community service fellowships to wounded and disabled veterans.
When we offer them a challenge, we find that many of them respond. It's the first time that somebody's come to them and has asked them to start to serve again.
Philip Sturgeon was one of those who responded. An Iraqi rocket-propelled grenade left him with traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder.
Come. Good boy.
As part of his fellowship, Philip is training LT, a chocolate lab, to be a service dog for another wounded veteran.
How does he help you?
He gives me purpose. He gives me something to look forward to during the day. He gives me a reason of being, the knowledge to know that I'm still serving, that I'm giving back to someone else.
And the thing about Labradors especially, you get unconditional love from them.
Yes. Sometimes more than I want.
Philip has another reason for his mission. His dad confined to a wheelchair from his tour in Vietnam.
Very true.
Philip wants nothing more than to see a veteran, like his dad, have the gift of a dog that he trained.
Man of very few words, but a lot of pride. He's my hero. You gotta be careful.
I will, baby.
Just one of the many heroes along Highway 50.
People think St. Louis, driving down Highway 50, they don't realize this is one of the great last resting places in America for people who've served.
Somebody can drive along Highway 50, and because of the sound barriers that are up, they might never know that they're driving right past Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery, where over 175,000 veterans and their families are buried. I think it's indicative of what we need to do as a culture, sometimes look beyond that barrier and really see all of our veterans.
I was on a stretcher and the priest was trying to talk to me and started reading me the 23rd Psalms, and I was telling him I'm not dead yet.
Major Anthony Smith is a fighter. When he came home from Iraq with brain damage, missing an arm, a hip, a kidney, and half his vision, this warrior felt he was useless. But he says it was this simple question which kept him from complete despair.
What do you want to do now? How are you going to continue to serve?
Eric Greitens, founder of The Mission Continues, asked it of him. When Greitens returned from his tour in Iraq, he was determined to continue his mission by helping other returning soldiers.
A lot of these men and women have severe post-traumatic stress disorder. They might be dealing with traumatic brain injury. They might be dealing with physical rehabilitation. And some of them, unfortunately, are in places where they're dealing with substance abuse and they're self-medicating.
Greitens challenges them to reconnect with their purpose in life through a fellowship, which finds them jobs and helps them set up their own businesses.
Fighting stance.
For Anthony, his mission is teaching martial arts to more than 200 at-risk kids. Despite his injuries, Anthony earned his black belt in martial arts, ran a triathlon, an Ironman race, and lives like he is not disabled.
Their biggest struggle is when you can get past yourself. They realize that, you know, there's a reason I'm still alive.
And what he teaches his kids is so much more than merely kicking and punching.
Be polite. Be polite. Be brave. Be brave. Respect yourself and others.
Well, you got kids that used to say, yep, no, Now they're saying, yes, sir.
1, 2, switch side. 3, 4. 10 push-ups, let's go.
When somebody tries to fight you and they pick on you too much, he teach you, like, your meditation to calm down.
One of the things we talked about is what? Patience, right?
When you're at school, you respect yourself of what you're doing, and you respect your adults for what they're telling you, and you do it, and you don't say nothing, and you never give up.
When his students' grades and behavior improve, each success is his own.
You know, you got that person where they're supposed to be at, so it makes you feel real good.
This renewed mission is working for more than 1,000 returning soldiers who now have purposeful jobs. They say that while their military service has ended, their service to their country has not.
An Army sergeant who works with Big Brothers Big Sisters. I've got another Army sergeant who works with the Red Cross. I've got a veteran who's working with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I've got folks who are working with Paralyzed Veterans of America. I think that our fellows represent a great hope for this entire generation of veterans.
For Anthony, helping others and healing himself.
So your mission will never end?
It never ends.
And Mission Continues expects to grant 150 fellowships in 2011. Willie?
Jenna, what a great story. For a lot of these soldiers, the fight continues after they get home from the battlefields.
Exactly.
Thanks, Jenna, so much.
Before I joined the SEAL teams, I never had any experience using a compass. But I learned very quickly. They gave me this compass, and they said, look, you can point this in a particular direction. And if you point it in a particular direction, you can walk all day. And you can walk through a desert, you can walk over mountains, you can walk through a forest, and what will happen is, at the end of the day, you'll end up in one very particular spot. They also said, and they made it very clear, that if I made a choice, I learned, that I was going to make a choice, that I was going to change my direction, maybe by just 1 or 2 degrees. But I was going to make a choice, that I was going to change my direction, maybe by just 1 or 2 degrees, and I was willing to walk that new path. I could walk that new path, and I could walk it through a desert. I could walk it over mountains. I could walk it through a forest. And what would happen is, at the end of the day, I'd end up in a very different place. Right? So you've all been brought together, right, for a couple of days where you have an opportunity to kind of take the high ground in your own life, in your own career. Think about your own leadership. What I'd like to ask you to do is to think about your own journey and think about what it might be like if you made a decision that you were going to emerge from here and you were going to make a change of course of just a couple of degrees. Now again, right, you will all recognize, as do our veterans, right, that that is a very easy thing to say and it's a very hard thing to do. And one of the reasons why it is so hard is because to really make a change of course, right, in your own leadership, to make a change of course that's going to transform your life, actually requires a tremendous amount of courage. It requires a tremendous amount of courage, but we live in a culture, I think, in which very oftentimes we misunderstand the virtue of courage.